All right, welcome. All right, so welcome everyone. I'm so glad that you have all joined us today for our kickoff workshop for the Teaching the Publicly Engaged Humanities to Undergraduates Summer Workshop Series. We're very glad to have you all with us today. My name is Lisa Dush, and I'm an Associate Professor of Writing, Rhetoric, and Discourse at DePaul University in Chicago. I'm also the Faculty Director of HumanitiesX, which is DePaul's Experiential Humanities Collaborative. Together with my colleague Amanda Loudermilk and Judd Ruggell. Amanda's the HumanitiesX coordinator, and Judd is a professor and head of the University of Arizona's Department of Public and Applied Humanities. We're so glad to bring together our panel today of 4 fabulous speakers. Next slide, Amanda. So today we have speaking or presented in the order that they'll speak, Sarah Fouts from the University of Maryland at Baltimore County. We have Barrie Borich and Heather Montez-Ireland from DePaul, and Jasmine Linabary, who's from the University of Arizona. Our speakers will speak in the order pictured, and they're going to move broadly from issues around collaboration in and with communities to collaboration with individual organizations to how to support collaboration between students on teams. Just a little bit of introduction on the workshop series. We imagine this as a space where faculty who are teaching college and university courses in public humanities could come together to learn and connect. Each of our speakers today is going to describe how today's theme, which is collaboration in public humanities courses and partnerships, has manifested in a partnership, a course, or an assignment that they have deployed. So we'll have some time after all of our speakers speak for some questions and answers. We have the question and answer function in Zoom enabled. So if you can leave your questions during the talks in the Q&A box, if you can submit them that way, then at the end of the 3 speakers or the 3 presentations, we'll address those questions. Just as a reminder, we have 2 additional workshops coming up this Thursday and next Thursday. And you can sign up for those on the HumanitiesX website. Next slide, please. All right, so just by way of framing the workshop series, Judd and I are going to say a few quick words about our respective programs, HumanitiesX and the Department of Public and Applied Humanities at the University of Arizona. So I'm from HumanitiesX. We're an initiative at DePaul that's supported by our College of Liberal Arts and Social Sciences and the Mellon Foundation. Each year we select an annual cohort of HumanitiesX fellows. They work as a cohort and in teams to develop new interdisciplinary project-based public humanities courses, all of which grant students credit towards our experiential learning requirement. You can see the key aspects of our model in the graphic on the right here. We've run 3 of these annual cohorts thus far. Each of them brings together 3 teams consisting of 2 faculty members, a community partner, and 2 students. And each of these teams co-designs and deploys a new course on our annual theme. So Barrie and Heather from DePaul today will describe their course from this year's cohort, which is on democracy and rights. And then we'll move it to Judd to introduce the University of Arizona's program.
Thanks so much, Lisa. And thanks to you all and HumanitiesX. It's a real thrill and privilege for Public and Applied Humanities to help support this great work. Not only the workshop series, but the stuff that you all are doing. Lisa was kind enough to add a few notes to this slide. I figured that they would be helpful to show what's possible when doing public-facing and applied work in an institutional context, that is, as a unit. You're going to hear from 4 of our fabulous faculty over the course of this series, and I can promise you they're great. It's a live thing doing public-facing and applied work at the institution. So I'm looking forward to the workshop series.
All righty. So we'll get started. Our first speaker today is Sarah Fouts, who's an assistant professor of American Studies at the University of Maryland, Baltimore County. She'll be speaking with us about a long-term project that she's been a part of through her university. Sarah also directs the university's public humanities minor, so she's got some expertise in that area as well. So we'll pass it on to Sarah.
All right. Hey, everyone. I'm very excited to be here, and thank you so much for the invite to be part of this great group. I am going to talk about the long-term collaborative projects and really kind of framing it through the Baltimore Field School at UMBC. I'll shorten the University of Maryland, Baltimore County to UMBC to make it easier. And kind of to give some overview, I do direct the Public Humanities Program minor at UMBC, so a lot of this it's really great to have coursework to be able to embed a lot of these projects in. And I also will want to give background. My research areas or interests are in food studies and immigration, as well as urban studies. So that's kind of the framing for this project. Let's see. I'm going to present on Sabor de Highlandtown, or Flavors of Highlandtown, which is a neighborhood in East Baltimore. And this project was done over 4 courses with my students at UMBC, along with our community partner, Southeast CDC, or Southeast Community Development Corporation, and with immigrant restaurateurs in Highlandtown neighborhood. Next slide, please. But kind of to give this theoretical overview of how we approach this work, and this particularly the collaborative research, is through the Baltimore Field School. And that is an idea that came out of Michelle Stefano and Nicole King at UMBC, who kind of thought of how can we do better in doing research with community partners? How can we improve this ethics and move away from extractive research practices? A lot of this work is, you can see in like the eds and meds literature, also like DeBarrie and Baldwin's work, Beyond the Ivory Tower. So thinking about how, not just like thinking about displacement in universities, but universities and kind of how we do research with communities and how we do teaching and kind of bring in community partners into coursework as well. So what we've tried to do with the Baltimore Field School is work with faculty, staff, and graduate students to do different workshops over time to really think critically about this research. And we brought in 8, so we had funding from Mellon, we had funding from ACLS, and we have kind of continued funding through Maryland Traditions, which is through our State Arts Council. So instead of just, we get the grant and we're done, we're trying to embed it in this ethos of how we do this work and how we bring in different affiliates at UMBC to kind of have this commitment to humanities research that's engaged and applied. Some of the, a big part of that work is bringing in a cohort of 8 community partners who really, not only do they have projects underway, but we help them, they help us think critically about how to do better in this work. And so we bring them in for different meetings and for the workshops to talk about the projects that they have underway, and really kind of improve those processes. A lot of the goals, and we fund them, we pay those community partners to be part of those projects. We're interested in how to build projects collaboratively, how to unlearn and undo lots of the work, the harm that universities have done with communities, as well as thinking about how to better take cues or even build research questions together with community partners and do the research design from the grant writing to the end of the project together. So like, it's just like a long-term project in the thinking and funding and kind of doing it collaboratively. We also, so rather than like me coming in with a research question top down, kind of understanding what's already happening, especially as someone who's an outsider to Baltimore, really working with people there to understand what's going on already and helping to build out those projects. At the same time, we want to, kind of, the result of this has been able to better understand issues that are actually taking place, while also it's been effective in kind of shifting change in Baltimore. For example, Nicole King, who's in the bottom right photo, She worked with her students to actually stop an eminent domain project with a private developer in West Baltimore, using humanities tools like historic preservation, mapping, walking tours, to help kind of protect and defend, working with community partners to block an eminent domain project. So it's actually in practice in the project I'll talk about, Subordinate Highlandtown kind of looks at a successful project and kind of giving voice to communities that are left out of the archive. And at the same time, we want to push the university to do better in terms of accessibility of payments. I know a lot of us deal with that. It's a lot of bureaucracy that we're working with. So we're trying to do better in that work, improve contract language. So the intellectual property isn't for the university, it was part of the community, has ownership of that. P&T guidelines, we've changed P&T guidelines to include community engagement. And really just like not pushing community partners to be beholden to academic timelines and things like that. At the same time, we don't want to make them go to too many committee meetings or be part of committees or do too much labor on our end. So it's kind of a balancing act in those processes. So overall, it's just kind of how can we be better at being collaborative, and how can we be better working together with the community partners. Next slide, please. So I've been working particularly with the Southeast CDC, and this is an organization that is located in East Baltimore. They've had a lot of kind of clashes with Johns Hopkins, which has built, displaced a lot of communities to build their medical complexes, and also kind of been extractive in working with the Spanish-speaking community to test out different survey instruments with Spanish language partners. Or community members without really giving back, just kind of, and what my friend who works at the Southeast CDC, he said they use this as a lab, which really resonated to me with that tone of being part of, not being part of the community, just kind of coming in and testing out this laboratory framework. And so I obviously, when I moved to Baltimore in 2018, I worked with him, he's a project manager with the Southeast CDC, to really do better. And, kind of what do you all need? What's already going on? How can I bring my interest in food and immigration and the tools that I know in humanities to help support what's going on there? So that's kind of the start of the Subordinate Highlandtown project. And what it did was partnering with their Main Street initiatives program. So there's a lot of, let me give a little background first. There's a large immigrant community in this neighborhood, Highlandtown, and the history is very much European, but contemporarily it's more Latin American and Asian immigrants that are opening up different mom and pop shops, mostly restaurants, grocery stores in that neighborhood. So when you go in the archives, when you look at, scholarship that's been written on this neighborhood, it's really mostly just focused on that European history. And there's a huge dearth of this more contemporary, and by contemporary, I mean the 80s history of these Latin American immigrants. So next slide, please. So over the course of the course of 4 semesters, I taught 4 different courses in which we really, use that as a research question. How can we better understand this neighborhood? How can we work with the Southeast CDC? And how do we work directly with these immigrant restaurant owners and food establishments? We work with street food vendors as well. So I started with this project in fall of 2021, teaching a humanities scholars course, where we really dug in the archives to see what existed. And we found mostly we're able to build a small archive of historical newspaper articles and advertisements that were about this community. And the culmination of that, we brought in Southeast CDC. We did a virtual event where the students presented the historical research that they found. And then, which wasn't much, which kind of was the argument that we had. And so spring of 2022, that kind of fed our research question of, how do we build an archive ourselves? So with a food ethnography course where I was teaching a lot of interview methods, thinking about ethics and field work, we took students to Highlandtown on 3 occasions to visit on field trips, to meet with the folks with whom we worked. And then we developed 5 oral histories, and then did transcriptions of those. Students produced short audio clips, and we posted them in a Night Lab story map, which is open source software. And they embedded the the audio clips. We had a presentation. Oh, and then we also did like a timeline using Night Lab. We did a culmination event at the Creative Alliance, which is a cultural space in the neighborhood, where we brought in the restaurant owners. They brought their foods. We had the Southeast CDC folks. We had about 80 people in attendance, and it was a really great showcase of the work the students did. They presented their research and kind of talked about their process in the project. That actually turned into the next year. I worked on a different project, but then the spring semester turned into one of the stories that a student did, Jess Godinez, actually turned into a short documentary film that was supported by the Library of Congress. So I worked with the Southeast CDC to shoot that project. And then we did produce the film during the spring and summer of 23. And in the fall, I was teaching an Intro to Public Humanities course, where we have this film produced. We're planning a screening. So how do we bring students in to support that, the production that's already been done? So they worked on zines to kind of bring in that history, which were these really small, beautiful, I should have put slides in there for those, beautiful small zines that you could flip through. They were bilingual. I had a couple students work to develop 2 more sites on the Night Lab story map. And then we had the short doc. I brought in the folks from the screenings to the classroom, and then we also did a field trip to Highlandtown again. So we had another event at the Creative Alliance where we screened it, and the students shared the zines. We had about 250 people in attendance, so really kind of getting these stories out there. Again, brought in the restaurant owners to be part of it. And then this last semester, I was teaching the food ethnography class again, and this time I had graduate students in the course, and so they really helped. They produced they did the field work with the oral histories. I had them lead teams, which produced the audio clips again to build out 5 more histories of these immigrant-owned businesses. The first iteration really focused on the Latin American stories, and then in this next iteration, we brought in a Chinese, Yemeni, and an Indian restaurant owners to actually kind of talk about how they fit into this broader Latin American history. So we're trying to, get a lot of the different voices of the neighborhood, and having students kind of think about these questions about neighborhood change. What does it mean to kind of tell these stories and shape these stories? Having them, work directly with the owners of the restaurants to send the clips to make sure they get the approval. Really going through each of being, very considerate and thoughtful in those processes. We brought in Jess Godinez from the original class to develop the ArcGIS story map website, which I'll have some clips in just a second to show. And then we had a virtual event in the spring, and we couldn't do an in-person event because of coordinating. It was too hard to get it within the student semester, and the Southeast CDC folks were really busy with their hard work they're doing with their nonprofit organization. So it was, we couldn't do this. We had the biggest kind of output of the digital work that we did, but we couldn't necessarily do the event to showcase it. But we do have it. If you go to the next screen, I can have it at least a different view here. So you can see here, I guess my images didn't come through very well, but on the left is actually the facade of the website, Suborde Highlandtown. You can see it has the information, which is an overview of the project, bilingual. Then you can see the map on the right, where you can click on these different mapping points and see the different places with the linked YouTube video with the photographs overlaid. So we gave each of the restaurant owners all the photos, the links to this, so they can use for their own marketing for the restaurants and whatever way they want. But we have, the students were able to produce each of these really beautiful clips for the different, all the different restaurants. Next slide, please. Thank you, Amanda. And then we also have the history where I had 5 groups of students were focused on the 5 different stories, and then the 6th group was focused on just developing the historical narrative and identifying which images would be best from the Baltimore Sun newspaper. And then they, wrote the narrative of each of these, and you could slide through, and there's about 10 different stories that are available in the history section. And if you go to, and then there's also really good press coverage on this over time. That's, I guess, the beauty of working on a long time project. People hear about it and want to know more. And then we have a bibliography that the students put together to kind of help tell this history. Next slide. And And you can see kind of the documentary linked here that was the Library of Congress supported, that the student originally worked on, that turned into this broader production that we've been able to do different screenings. I'll wrap up with this final slide here with some of the takeaways and project elements. Oh, I didn't talk about the archive. So obviously we did the digital storytelling component, the oral history archive, which is at UMBC with the Maryland Traditions Archive, which I'm still working on with another student to help do the metadata and clean up the transcriptions. We did the mapping project, and then the with over 50 UMBC students, we developed these public humanities skills. We worked over time. There was still quick turnaround with some of the oral histories to develop them with the restaurant owners, but we were able to, really get to know them and get to meet them and share with them these different stories. And they were so proud of the different work that was done. And I think one of the big things that was with the Southeast CDC, they really wanted it to be a marketing project, and we were hyping it up as a historical project, but we were able to say, why can't it be both things ultimately? And then I think the thing I'll close on is we really didn't know. We knew the research question was like, there's a lack of this history and what can we do? And as we kept doing these different components and kept having different examples of what we had done, we could keep building out on it. And so that's kind of the beauty of this project is we didn't know what it was going to be. And then it turned out to be this great project. So I'll end there and I'll put a link to the website in the chat. Thank you all.
Right. Thanks so much, Sarah. If anyone has questions for Sarah, again, just feel free to drop those into the Q&A box, and we'll get to them after our four speakers. Our next two speakers are going to be Barrie Borich and Heather Montes-Ireland, both from DePaul. Barrie's a professor of English who specializes in creative writing. She's the director of DePaul's LGBTQ Studies minor. Heather is an associate professor of women and gender studies here at DePaul. And Barrie and Heather are going to describe a new course that is a HumanitiesX course that they just finished teaching with the Gerberhardt LGBTQ plus Library and Archives here in Chicago.
Great, thank you, Lisa. Yes, hello everyone. We're very excited to talk to you today about our class that, like Lisa said, we just finished and our big exhibit that we have went up on June 7th. So today we're going to talk to you. Our presentation is Do Say Gay, Exhibiting LGBTQ plus Rights and Freedoms Through Collaborative Partnerships in the Experiential Humanities. Our class, Do Say Gay, right, it actually was called Do Say Gay, Ban Books and LGBTQ Freedoms, is, as Lisa was saying, HumanitiesX course that was at its very core collaborative. And so we're going to focus a little bit on that today with you, like our collaborations with particularly our community partner. But this is a course that brought together actually two faculty, right, across our different fields, as well as two students from two different fields and our community partner. But we focused, Barrie and I first came together in 2023 to address the urgent issue. As you can see some of the visuals here, the urgent issue of the market increase in the challenging and banning of books, approximately 50% of which are titles with LGBTQ plus and LGBTQ plus stories and stories of people of color. So we were concerned, right? We have this urgent issue. And so we came together with this project-based and collaborative course that would utilize the humanities and humanities methods and experiential learning. So next slide, please, Amanda. Yeah, so the course, right, it was project-based and collaborative, right? So we were trying to do a lot of things, trying to make a lot of things happen here. Right, we wanted a course particularly, right, that would both utilize the humanities to understand the issues that were going on here, what was behind it, what's driving these attacks, as well as to respond, right, to these moves to limit LGBTQ life and freedoms. So to do this, right, we garnered support, of course, from HumanitiesX, but we needed a dynamic community partner. And so thankfully we found that it was even better than we could have imagined, right? But we wanted a community partner where we could have a mutually beneficial and reciprocal relationship, right? A community partner that would share our values, right? The values we were holding as educators and what we're trying to do in the class. And so we reached out to an organization called the Gerberhardt LGBTQ plus Library and Archives. The image you see here actually is an image from the culminating exhibit, the culminating project for the class. Next slide, please, Amanda. And so again, just to give you an idea of the levels of collaboration that were going on here, this is a photo of both Barrie, Jean Borich, and myself with our 2 student fellows. So it was 2 professors, 2 student fellows who aren't exactly students in the class, but are actually helping to sort of teach the class, and our community partner, which we will talk about a little more in just a minute. So Barry's going to talk to you next more about the course. Next slide, Amanda, please. Thank you.
Hi, folks. Yes, so I came to this collaboration, which is also, we should point out, a collaboration between Heather and myself at the very, at the team teaching level, which is not something we get that many opportunities to do. I come to this from creative writing, which is by nature project-based, and also from a writing and publishing program where we produced books and magazines, etc. So I come from a place of classes that are structured toward making something and having that thing that's made be what the culmination of the course is. So we structured this course with that in mind. That is what we're supposed to be doing in HumanitiesX anyway, but I think we had a particularly ambitious project. And as we're the 3rd cohort of HumanitiesX, so we were warned repeatedly that we needed to build this stuff in from the start, that we couldn't say, okay, it's week 8. And let's build the exhibit. So from day 1, we were working on the exhibit. So this is an excerpt from the syllabus where we told the students from the get-go, think of this class as a large funnel with all your work feeding into the public exhibition. We actually had 2 public exhibitions. We had a midterm pop-up library on campus where students created one-pagers, explainers, talking about things they had found in the archives or banned books they had found at the Chicago Public Library. This image here is an image of the Theaster Gates exhibition at the Chicago Public Library. Theaster Gates is a Chicago installation artist, and this is an exhibition including and on banned books as part of the Chicago Public Library's Book Sanctuary program. So, so we brought them here. They saw an exhibition, and then we have a 10-week quarter. No Time to Wander. Group themes were in place on the syllabus. These 4 themes you see here: Save Our Children, Silence Equals Death, Open Books, Open Minds. We have always been banned. So we knew ahead of time what the exhibition components were going to be, but we didn't know how they were going to create them. What were they going to make to fill out this idea? The structure was on Tuesdays, we were on campus doing a more conventional class discussion, and on Thursdays we were at the archives, actually in choosing things for exhibition, talking with the librarians, etc. The dual locations were key. This took a lot of upfront work because we had to make sure everyone who was enrolled had taken into consideration city transit time, comfort with public transit, all of the things that we needed to get them from campus to the archive site. And with the emphasis on experiential learning, which is a requirement at DePaul, we also embedded in 2 hours of volunteer work for every student. So the students were deeply involved with the archives, and we then did a survey early on to see what are their preferences, what are their skills, and that's how we put the groups together. And I'll pass it back to Heather to talk about what came of that. Twice actually. Yeah.
Twice, I know, still. Wow.
If you-
Amanda, next slide, please. Thank you so much. Right, so we couldn't have done what we did without our community partner, and we have a couple of slides to share with you all about what actually the class did. But I do want to say just a word or two about this community partner and why for our class in particular, and maybe folks can be thinking about the ways that you might in your own work, right, collaborate with a community partner. We couldn't have done this without this particular community partner. We feel really strongly about that, right? So Gerber Hart, if you're unaware, is Chicago's LGBTQ plus library and archives, right? It has been here since the 1980s in various kind of formations. It is a private library, privately funded, but serves the public. And so it is a very, very small staff, right? And so there is a caveat here that I will say that one of the really, I think, pivotal things for us in working with Gerber Hart was that there was funding. There was funding through HumanitiesX and through the Mellon Grant because they only have 3 staff members. 2 of them are librarians, and then one of them is more like community facing in terms of what that person does, a lot of programming. So here you can see an image of our class, our students actually in the space of this isn't exactly where the library is, but it is in an atrium space where we met every single Thursday. And you can see them actually working with some of the archival materials in their class. And also on the right-hand corner is actually a photo of some of the actual archives of Gerber Hart. Next slide, please, Amanda. And then another thing about this particular partner, right, is that they're a circulating library and archives, and they also have special collections, right? So the librarians here in the first photo, you can see one of our librarians, Erin Bell, who's director of operations, actually pulling things out from the archives, which we're going to talk to you about in just a moment, how these kind of materials were located and how we worked with them. But they brought expertise, right? This is one of the things that I think is so important about this collaboration. This community partner, they brought an expertise, right, in LGBTQ plus archives, in histories nationally, but also particularly in Chicago, and an expertise in curation. The event that I'm going to tell you about in just a moment actually came up organically by us going to the partner, talking with them, and talking together about what would be mutually beneficial, right? But then the last thing too about our community partner is that they have an expertise in public events, particularly public events about queer lives. They do some really amazing programming. So again, here, photos, the first 2 of us actually working on Thursdays in the classroom in this space. And the third photo here is the students in the actual library space. So Amanda, next slide, please. I'll hand this to Barrie.
So we're going to talk a little bit about just the nitty gritty of how we collaborated with the librarians. And you know, there was so much we did not know going in. Everyone was enthusiastic and on board, but we didn't really know what the logistics were going to be. And we found out pretty quickly that one problem was communication between us and the archivists. You know, in the dream world, everyone was in every room every day. But when we got to the reality of the class on Tuesdays, the librarians had a library to run and were not hanging out in our class. And so we would decide things for class and not realize, oh, they don't really know what we're doing. And so we had to do a lot of work figuring out how to communicate, because they could not join our course management system where we were putting everything, et cetera. And so we needed to find other ways to quickly and efficiently communicate so that what the students were doing and what the librarians were doing gelled. We also needed a way to assign student writing, because one of the requirements of the course was that for experiential learning was that it had to have a particular amount of writing. How were we going to do that writing? How were we going to use that writing instead of just assigning reflections, on the side that they were doing in addition to the work? What we did was we used an active tool to so that their writing and their exhibition work and the zines they created at the end were all of a piece. So Amanda, could you click that link to Padlet? Am I at 3 minutes, Lisa?
That's right. Yep.
Oh, okay. Well, just quickly, I'll just finish up that we used this tool. The students that I started using during the pandemic. We put up if you scroll to the left, Amanda, you can just
The bottom.
scroll that way. You'll see there you go. So you see they would post something they found in the digital archives. They would write about it on the Padlet. We would give the library the link to the Padlet, and the library would lay out all the work for them. They would come in on Thursday, the things would be there, and we would go forward from there. Okay, and I can stop with that.
Great. Thanks, Barrie. Next slide, please, Amanda, or well, back and then next slide. Thanks, Amanda, for doing that. That's a little more of a complicated thing, but that worked beautifully. Great. Thank you so much. So in our remaining time, I'll just show you all the two events. We had one event around midterm for us, which was week 5. But Barrie and I were really intentional in working and collaborating with multiple stakeholders all along the way. That's one thing. And then the second thing is that everything we were doing, we were hoping would lead to this culminating event. So in week 5, the students, you can see 2 of them here, they're exhibiting books, but also findings already, pieces that they had found in the archives at Gerber Hart, and they were asked to write up something about those archives and talk about it in various forms and creative forms at that. So, but this particular event here, and you can also see the flyer we had, this was a collaboration with the DePaul University Library as well. So our student fellows, Gerber Hart librarian, one of the librarians was there, and then DePaul University as well. Right. And I think actually because of those collaborations, we were able to pull off, sometimes people think, oh, there's so much going on or that's so much to do. But again, the collaboration by getting all of these folks in there and their talents actually made it possible. So next slide, please. Thank you, Amanda. And then here is the flyer for the culminating event. Basically, we had an archival exhibit then in the exhibit space at the Gerber Hart Library. So, right, this is again at their space, something that we wanted to make sure that it was, again, the mutual goal of student learning, but also what would be useful for Gerber Hart and what they were great at. And this is something they're great at. So we did have a public exhibit opening, as we mentioned, on June 7th, and a program. Next slide, please, Amanda, so we can leave you with a few photos of what the students produced out of their 4 groups. Here, examples of parts of the exhibit from the Save Our Children group and the Silence Equals Death group. Next slide, please, Amanda. This is an example of, the students all being there, the exhibit opening. Again, Gerber Hart is great at this. This is their space. The librarians were in there just hands-on the entire time making this happen. Last slide, I think, Amanda, please, and we'll wrap up. Yes, and we'll leave you with a photo of our students actually in the Gerber Hart Library right before we were getting ready to head out to greet the public and to kind of open the exhibit. So I think just to conclude, Barrie has put the beautiful assignment that she created for our pop-up, the midterm pop-up library exhibit that we did to share out with folks. So, but we look forward to, there's so much we could talk about here, and we look forward to talking with you all and to folks' questions. So thank you.
Right. Thank you, Barrie and Heather. So again, if you have any questions for Barrie and Heather about their course or their project or their partnership, just leave them in the Q&A area and we'll get to them after our last speaker, who is Jasmine Linabary. So Jasmine is an assistant professor in the Department of Public and Applied Humanities at the University of Arizona. She literally wrote the book on collaboration, so she's published an open access textbook on small group communication and teams, and she teaches several courses at University of Arizona that incorporate substantive student team collaboration. So Jasmine is going to shift us a little bit to focus on the why and the how of student teams and how you can foster successful collaboration among students in public humanities courses.
Great, thank you so much. Thank you so much. And I'm so pleased to be part of this workshop today and the amazing work that my colleagues have talked about before me. As mentioned, I'm going to take it in a slightly different direction. You heard my colleagues kind of talk a little bit about this work being done in groups and teams among students. And so I want us to imagine it's the first day of class. We have spent so much time cultivating these relationships with the community, right? We're so excited and energized about this project that we have underway. We're starting to tease and introduce it to our students, and we say, and you're going to work in groups. Audibly in the classroom, you may even hear some groans. You may even hear some deep sighs. And that comes from a particular place, right? Our students are thinking, will I be the one doing all the work yet again? Or is someone going to dominate and take over this group? Next slide, please. So I want to start with this quote from a student reflection, because I think it speaks to why it's so important that we be intentional in supporting our students in this work. So the student wrote, even though the ability to collaborate is such a vital skill to have during academic and professional experiences, I, like many others, have not previously been taught how to communicate. I've been expected to know how to collaborate with peers and coworkers time and time again, yet I had never received specific instruction on how to successfully form, organize, or run a collaborative group. Next slide. So my goal in my short portion of our workshop today is to think a little bit more about that and to offer you some strategies to help support your students in collaborating more effectively. Next slide. So why is this important? Well, I'm sure we're all very well aware, those of us who have sought to facilitate group work or been part of collaborations ourselves, that collaboration doesn't always go the way we imagine in our most ideal, right? Ideally, it would be equitable. Ideally, everyone would care the same about the project. Ideally, everyone would be highly motivated. But often we've seen, and our students may have experienced, that not to be the case. So I often use this meme to talk about this and kind of name this unspoken thing in the class or in the classes that I teach. You know, you have the one person who does 99% of the work, either because they take over the project or because other people haven't shown up. One who has no idea what's going on the whole time. One who says he's going to help, but he's not. And one who disappears at the very beginning and doesn't show up again until the very end. For students, this is a very familiar scenario to them. There's a giggle of recognition of this situation. But learning how to collaborate well is really important. It's not just something that they're expected to do in classes while they're in college. Next slide, please. So according to the American Association for Colleges and Universities in 2021, they surveyed future employers, and the number one thing that folks said was very important at the top of the list was the ability to work effectively in teams. So it's not enough that we just throw our students in teams and say, have fun, good luck, but we actually need to support them to do it well so that they can do it well beyond our classrooms, right, in their future careers. While I'm on this slide, I also just want to highlight that many of the other skills listed here are ones that are directly related to the humanities, right? We have critical thinking skills on here, digital literacy, ethical judgment and reasoning, and particularly relevant to the work we're talking about in the public and applied humanities, the application of knowledge and skills in real world settings. So our students' collaborations are not just collaborations for collaboration's sake, but they're for a purpose, right? A purpose greater than themselves. So next slide, please. So I'm going to speak a little bit drawing on two different courses that I currently teach and offer you some examples from each. One of them is directly about collaboration itself, PAH 220. So it's collaboration from a humanities perspective. And we have a whole semester to talk about collaboration and how we do it well, right? We can build in a lot of different things along the way that provides a unique opportunity to really bolster these skills among students. Students in that class engage in a collaborative action project that is a scaffolded semester-long experience where they work together to co-design a communication campaign to support student basic needs on our campus. In PH 201, however, this is our applied humanities practice class. So think of this as kind of like the methods class for undergrads. And so in here, we're thinking about how do we do this kind of community engaged work and expose students to a variety of methods of doing so, from narrative to arts-based methods, and then also different kinds of outputs, right? Traditional like reports, but also creative methods like digital exhibitions, like some of the other kinds of outputs like you've seen some of my colleagues demonstrate today. In this class, collaboration is one of many strategies and techniques and tools of the public humanities that we're trying to teach, but it's not the only one, right? So we don't get the same level of attention and time, but because of the group work, it's vital to still provide support for students in their collaborative relationships with each other. Next slide, please. So in this next slide, I highlight kind of what I think about as the humanities perspective on collaboration and what I think we have to contribute. Obviously, lots of folks, psychology, business, and others talk about collaboration. Humanities, I think, provides a unique perspective of thinking about some of the different skill sets that come into play that we can especially contribute to the collaborative process. And then also the ability to think about it as embedded within multiple structures and systems. So I think of collaboration as engaging in critical and creative thinking skills, requiring practicing reflexivity, requiring developing intercultural competence to work with diverse and others. It requires us to improve our communication skills, and importantly, requires us to be able to apply and adapt to the situation. It's not enough to have a set of skills and strategies because it's not a one-size-fits-all situation. Every collaboration is different. Every group of people that you throw together to work together is different. And so it's about learning some different tools, but then being able to also experiment and adapt to the situation that you're in. I also think of all of this as embedded within particular contexts, so our geographic context, particular histories, individual and collective, cultural contexts, and then of course the identities that we as individuals and our group members bring to the process. Next slide, please. Oh, I think we went back a slide. So in my classes, in the longer class, we get a whole semester to talk about a lot of different best practices throughout. In a class where it's not our main focus, though, I do try before we start the semester and start putting ourselves in groups for the first time to actually talk about how do we collaborate effectively and to initiate some conversations about things that are important to remember and keep in mind. I'm not going to go into all of these for sake of time today, but I want to highlight a couple of them that I think are especially important to think about and consider. And then I have a tips document that's in kind of the takeaways folder that will be shared with you that you can take a look at to learn more about some of these if you're interested. One of the most important ones that I hope my students take away is that relationships matter. Our students' tendency is when we throw them into groups and give them a task is to jump to task. They're focused on efficiency, but not necessarily effectiveness. They want to get it done because they're busy, right? They have so many other classes, so many other things that they're doing. They have jobs, they have extracurriculars. And so the emphasis is on getting it done and getting it done quickly. But effective collaboration takes relationship. It takes trust. It takes us to be able to navigate conflict together. It takes us to feel open and vulnerable enough to express when we disagree, to come up with our best ideas. And so I emphasize to students that even that off-task communication is important. It's not something we should try to avoid or erase. So things like icebreakers matter, right? Things like sharing your favorite TikTok video in the group chat matters. Things like asking each other how you're doing as a whole person matters. Another one that I try to emphasize for students is the importance of meta communicating regularly. So communicating about our communication. So here I mean that we need to sometimes zoom out and look at our process. Who's talking? Who's not talking? Who's talking to whom? Who's dominating the discussion and who's not, right? And paying attention to some of those dynamics of how we're communicating with each other in the group and addressing those. One of the ways that we can address them kind of on the outset and throughout is through developing clear communication guidelines. And students sometimes need a lot of guidance around this, because I find that when we say, throw out some communication guidelines, they'll say, well, respect each other. Communicate with the group frequently. And I'll throw back to them and say, well, what if you and I have a different definition of what frequency means? Maybe frequency to me means you respond within the hour, versus for someone else it means sometime this week. What if respect and what respect looks like is different for us? So it's really important that when you're setting communication guidelines as a group to get really specific and tangible and not leave them open to interpretation, because that's where we start to feel the rub in groups. And then a third one I'll share very quickly before moving on to some other things that I want to share today is to make sure that you're sharing your goals and being honest about what are called your hidden agendas. So those things that you don't often disclose to your group, but are part of what's going on in your life. It's really important to let others know what matters to you and what else is going on, so that they can be understanding of that. When they don't know what's going on, our tendency is to engage in faulty attributions, to assume that you're not showing up because you're lazy, not because you had to take on a third shift, right? Or that your grandparent just passed away, or that you're struggling with your mental health, right? And so it's really important that we be open about that with our group members, so that we can be understanding and find ways to support each other. All right, next slide. So a couple examples of core strategies that I engage across classes, whether it's the focus is on collaboration or not. One is, I think it's always important to start with individual reflection. So often the tendency is to point outwards when groups go wrong, right? Like they didn't do their work. Individual reflection encourages us to start by looking inward and saying, where am I strong as a group member, as a collaborator, and where am I not? Where do I need to grow? This might involve engaging in some, like a self-reflective paper in some cases. In some cases, it might also look like taking some quizzes or assessments to kind of understand how you approach conflict, what kinds of accountability you need to be able to do group work or to do work in general, and then taking that self-awareness with you before you join a group. Also, relationship building. So incorporating really intentional time and reminders of being people first. So all of my classes include intentionally an icebreaker at the start. And sometimes the students are groany about it at the beginning, but the research actually shows that icebreakers do make a difference. And we talk about some of that literature and research as well. Oftentimes they're tied into the class. Sometimes they just help us talk about fun things like looking at pictures of our pets. But they're a good way to kind of break the ice and get us in and talking to each other. We also offer affirmations of group members, especially after key tension points in the group project. And then in my class about collaboration, I actually require the students to do at least 2 social gatherings and document it. So they have to actually do something that is not task related as a group, take a photo, write a caption, tell me what they did together. I also require groups across my classes to do group contracts. So this is an opportunity for us to get really explicit together on their goals as a group. So what do you hope to accomplish together, both in terms of process and outcomes, what communication channels we're going to use, what communication guidelines we have, our roles and our timeline. Other examples of strategies include group evaluation forms and debriefing meetings to encourage that kind of meta communication throughout and provide opportunities for intervention points before they implode at the end of the semester, so we can intervene earlier in the process to make changes. I encourage individual and collective accountability. So in longer term scaffolded assignments, having parts that you individually complete that contribute to the group in addition to the collective parts, so that everyone has accountability for their part. And then also mini lessons on collaborative pain points. So some things you start to realize over time that come up repeatedly. Rather than having to always do individual coaching of groups, I offer targeted mini lessons in class. A routine one that I often offer is related to how do we communicate about task, for example, so that a task gets done in a way where you don't have to feel like you need to redo it. And also that person feels empowered to do the work and not questioning what am I supposed to be doing. So these are just a few strategies that I can recommend to you all. If we could go to the last slide to conclude, please. So I just want to end with this student reflection. Throughout the semester, I was given the opportunity to learn a variety of valuable techniques surrounding collaborating with my group. Although we didn't always implement them successfully, the experience of learning strategies while facing related hardships allowed us to all grow in our abilities to collaborate, both individually and within the group. Collaboration is never going to be perfect for any of us, but the goal is to equip our students with strategies to do it better and to feel more confident in doing so. So thank you for your time, and I look forward to your questions.
Right. Thanks, Jasmine. All right. Amanda, do you want to pull us in, all the presenters in, and we'll take some Q&A right now. We have some questions in the Q&A space that I'll parse out to the presenters. And then if you have additional questions, just drop them in that Q&A space. We'll spend about 10 minutes on Q&A, and then we have a activity focused on collaboration for you all to do in smaller breakout rooms. We hope you'll stick around for that, just so that we have an opportunity to kind of chat with each other and to meet out of the presenting context. All right, so Sarah, let's start with a few questions for you about we had a couple of questions about the extended nature of your partnership, and how that is both whether students continue their work after the semester has ended, and also how you frame a new course for students when they're continuing work that was begun in a prior course.
Great. So for students, you know, a lot of it is like having the continuity of, let me start with the framing of the course. Yeah, so usually, I mean, I talked a lot of hype about not knowing what it's going to look like, but for each semester, I knew what the end goal would be, right? So that was easy to frame. And even when we had some, like the archives developed, it was easy to show what we had done, to be able to, you know, say what we need to do next. So we always had some sort of base, either question or base like project that had been done as like a kind of prototype of where we're going to start with and what we're going to do. And then with and it was, you know, consistently across the board, we were working with the same community partners at the Southeast CDC. We were working with this, we were taking students on the same field trips and the same walking tour in the town. Mostly the same readings. We kind of mix it up a little bit. And then with the students, you know, I had like the Jess Godinez story is the best, because they started as, you know, working on the oral history, working on the audio clip, and then we're the one that ultimately converted all the information into the final story map project. And I brought them in to talk about their experience in the previous class. They use their tools from their geography undergrad. So it was really cool to see that like transpire for their class. And we also paid them to develop the final project. So it was like, you know, even getting students money, I think is really important. Right now we have the student working with me to do the metadata and the transcription formatting and things like that is a student who took the Intro to Public Humanities seminar, who's a Public Humanities minor. We're paying her through a grant to help me with a lot of this, that side of work. So she's getting that hands-on skills to be able to do those projects. My goal is to make kind of a lot of what Jasmine was talking about, right? A lot of these transferable skills to say, you know, here's how this will get you a job. And I'm not, you know, I'm all about like the theory and everything and not just talking about jobs, but, you know, but I am like, this actually works. And there's a bunch of students we've had come out of this program that have really great public humanities jobs right now. And so I think that's what's been successful. And then bringing those, you know, I brought students in. A student was doing an internship at the Library of Congress, brought her back to speak with the students. So really keeping those students engaged and then also in the know of like this final project sitting out to that original class, and then the students in the second class to be like, look what you did. It wasn't all for nothing. Like you actually contributed to this really beautiful thing. It was hard to envision at that point, but here it is. I think I answered all the questions.
Great, thank you. Barrie and Heather, a couple questions for you about the logistics of your partnership and collaboration. So first, Did you go for the grant and then do the work with a community partner, or did you have the partnership with Gerber Hart first and then go for the grant? And then second, we just have some logistical questions about how long you had to develop the course, whether you had course releases or other development time, how many students in the class. So wondering about if you're trying to have a robust collaboration like this, what kind of supports are necessary?
Right.
Which of course, you know all the answers to that too, Lisa.
I do know
I
those,
mean,
yeah.
I mean, it was
Great.
this Mellon Foundation grant that allowed this to happen for us. And we did get course releases to build the course, which I don't think I've ever had that in my life before. I mean, that was an amazing help. We had we came to the community partner with the funding. I mean, that's how we got them to even talk. And we applied. The funding was part of HumanitiesX that Heather and I had to apply for. We weren't on board yet. We had to get a community partner on board, find out they were interested. Then we wrote, it wasn't a grant so much as a proposal to the program Lisa runs. And then because we were chosen, then we had funding to give to the community organization, which, as Heather said, was so important because they did so much work and we never had to feel like we were imposing on them. Yeah.
Yes,
Do you want to add
exactly.
to that, Heather? Yeah.
Yeah, right. So to the very, very first question, we went to them and sort of pitched it, right? So it is a little bit, it was one of the requirements of HumanitiesX to make this proposal that you have a community partner in mind. And so we contacted Gerber Hart, just we cold called them actually, because we didn't really have a relationship with them. Not like that, before. And by the way, I want to add, when we approached them, we were so excited about them. We thought we had this brilliant idea, and we found out that they had 2 part-time librarians. So that also, right, if that had been the case, that would have also maybe changed some of what we were doing. We were lucky enough that we approached them. They were so excited about the pass-through funding, but they were also just really, really excited about what we were pitching, but at that time, right, we weren't talking about like, would we be able to have class like actually in their space? So funding is so important, right? It matters. Thankfully, they
got their own Mellon grant during this period,
right,
allowed them to go full time. So
that's right, which was huge. And then I'll say one more thing is, yes, Barrie and I did not have another class to teach, right, at the time that we're doing. I mean, I think that one is also huge, that we could focus specifically on this course through the spring quarter. And that because I mean, normally, right, you'd be in class for 3 hours and you have 2 classes, you'll be in the classroom for 6, but we were in meetings for 3 hours every week, on top of our class. So that
and ordering supplies and I mean that alone took 2 days.
Meeting with each other,
right, so
right, ordering supplies, all of those logistics. So thank you. I think that's everything. Thank you.
I think you got it all. Yeah. Yeah. And just for the compensation for partners in HumanitiesX is generous. They basically get $17,600 for a commitment that lasts from September to June. And that was written into the grant, and that's been really important because it pays them for their time, and it's a good carrot for really effective collaboration. Jasmine, a question for you about if you have any logistical recommendations about like team size and how many students you have in a typical class and how those team sizes usually parse out.
Yeah, that's a good question. I find that in my experience that groups of 3 to 5 are a good number. 4 is usually where I end up. And now I teach in collaborative classrooms where the tables are 4. And so I try to keep them to 4 for that reason. And I would say part of that is that's a lot harder for someone to kind of fall into that sort of social loafing role when there are fewer people. When there are fewer people, it's a lot easier for everyone to be able to contribute and have space to contribute. And also, I think for students, logistically, for scheduling purposes, the larger you make the group, the harder it is also for them to do the work, because their schedules are sometimes so hard to mix together to allow them to have that time for collaboration beyond the classroom as well. So I think 3 to 5 has been optimal for me. The classes that I teach right now are typically about 50 students. And so that ends up being, you know, about 10 to 11 groups, depending on the semester and the number of students we end up with, you know, by the time we actually form groups. Sometimes, you know, a couple shake off along the way. But yeah, if that answers the question.
Thank you. Yeah, 50 is big. The HumanitiesX courses are capped at 20. Somebody had asked that question. I don't know, Sarah, about course size typically for you.
For the intro to public humanities class, it's 25, and for the ethnography class, it's 15.
Great.
It's great.
Okay, good. So I want to hustle us along just so we get a little time to talk with each other in smaller groups. So we have an exercise to get us thinking a little bit about collaboration, and we'll start off with an activity just here in the main chat that Jasmine will introduce us to, and then we'll just split us off into groups of 5 or so with each of the presenters, and then they're gonna have you introduce yourselves to each other and just continue the conversation a bit in breakout groups.
Okay, great. Well, we wanted to provide a little time and space in here to collectively think about what an ideal collaboration for us looks like, and then how we can live into some of the values that we might have around our ideal collaborations. So we want to give folks a few minutes right now, before we get in groups, to really reflect on, at its best, what would your ideal collaboration, and we're going to focus here on community partners rather than students for the moment, with a community partner look like? So I want you to just really take a few moments to take in that question and to think about what your response might be. And then based on your reflections, I want you to think about, what are the 2 to 3 most important values or commitments for collaboration in order to reach that idealized collaboration, and why? And then ultimately, we'll have you share your values into the chat. So let's all take a few moments just to reflect. You can open up a document and type. You can have a piece of paper and jot down notes, or just kind of stare off in space and think, whatever works best for you. So we'll just give you a few moments to reflect on your own. We've got a lot of great values being dropped into the chat right now. Continue to feel free to add there. And I feel like in just a few moments, we'll go into breakout rooms. And what we're going to ask you to do in those breakout rooms is to take a moment to share your name and affiliation. And then what are the most important values and commitments for you? And then our goal is to kind of come away with, say, 2 to 3 that the group considers to be most important. As we have time to also be thinking about how we put those values into practice across the different stages of a partnership or a course that we might be designing together. So that will be our goal in the breakout room, is to try to come back with a few takeaways regarding what we consider to be most important. You can also note areas of kind of divergence in group discussions too, because we might not always agree with what is most important.
All right, I will send folks to the breakout rooms. And if there are any issues, you can direct message me, Amanda Loudermilk, in the chat, and I will help you troubleshoot.
Thanks, Amanda.
All right. So I hope everybody got to meet somebody new today. And let's just take a few minutes to debrief, either on values that emerged as really important, or on tactics that you can use to enact those values in partnerships or in courses. Anybody can take the floor, but if we have some awkward Zoom silence, we'll just give it to the group leaders to speak.
I can go first.
Great.
We had a great group and a really good discussion. I think we got a lot in, about 7 points, and then we narrowed it down to 3. The things that we came out with were, the first one that I'll talk about is being mindful of students' time and labor, while also being mindful of the community partners' time and labor. So really understanding, how do we have those moments of students, they're busy reckoning with that, but also community partners are really busy and navigating a lot of different family work, etc. So I think that was a really important commitment we came up with. The next one was the sustainability and how it yields through lasting values. I like that framing from Sherry, and thinking about what does sustainability look like, and really how do we make sure, do things just end, or how do we make sure they can sustain themselves? And also the last thing we talked about was like knowing when to let go, which I think is a healthy practice too. And then the fourth one really kind of transcended our list, which was communication, and really just being mindful, flexible. We really liked Jasmine's discussion of sharing the goals, and the idea of the hidden agendas was great. So just being really honest and open dialogue with the projects and the processes. So I'll stop there.
Thanks, Sarah. The groups.
I can say something next because thanks, Sarah. Yeah, I spoke with Jill and Judd, and actually we didn't get to necessarily narrow things down. It was really interesting hearing from them both, because we had a lot of overlap. But one of the kind of the things that came up though were very much about values that were logistical, right? Is that I hope I'm doing that. I hope I'm restating this right. Jill and Doug, please jump in at any point. But right, so we talked about the need for care and communication. Like there was a lot of that Jill was talking about, right? That need for like mutual listening, and that actually can facilitate a really great collaboration or not. And I really loved that as a value, right? This idea of like care that has to be from all parties, right? That there has to be like a buy-in from all parties. That was great. And then another one, we were talking about sort of, again, maybe administrative or logistical thing. I thought, yeah, Lisa, you'd agree with this a lot, but this idea of like making sure that it's reasonable and that everyone knows like what you're there to do, that it's reasonable, what you're trying to do is not going to take over your lives. So that's really, really important to kind of define, like, what is it we're here to do? And is this something that everyone can do? This is an important value I hadn't really considered in that way. And then lastly, this idea of like releasing control. So releasing control and surrendering to the process, that is really important to deep collaboration. So if you have, you know, groups or stakeholders coming together who are not willing to really like deeply listen to each other and to surrender to the process, or what I was thinking about, like bringing everyone's talents together, making sure everyone's there, that they can do what they do well, right? So surrendering to the process, like, is an actual like value that we can hold in collaboration. Great conversation.
Terrific. Thank
I
you,
think
Heather.
that segues into our conversation very well, because we talked a lot about, and one of Lisa's values was fun, and we also talked we also talked about, you know, the what Heather has heard me say this, the Taylor Mack mantra of the art is in the room, you know, to let things happen, to be open, you know, provide a structure, direct people to their corners to do X, Y, Z, and then let go, right? See what happens and be surprised, and to be willing to be surprised. And yeah, so I think we all agreed on some level of how important that was, even not only to the class, but to us as educators. Yeah. Harris, Bill, does that sound on the mark? Yeah.
Yeah, and building off of that, I was just going to add that our care was a big one that came up in our group too. So care, trust, and responsibility were the key ones that we kind of coalesced around in our group. And care, we also talked about modeling it for students, that like in order to do it well with our partners, we also have to model that it's important, and how that might look with our students and in our classrooms, encouraging them to care for each other, but also doing things like check-ins on our students as a way of demonstrating care toward them. All
right. Well, I'm watching our time here. I don't want to run us over the hour, but thank you all for coming, and thanks for participating in the chat part. Thank you to all of our speakers today. It was terrific. We have 2 more of these coming up this Thursday, and then the Thursday after. We'd love to have you all join us. If you're interested in speaking with any of the presenters, just reach out to them or to me. I'm happy to put you in touch. And we have, lastly, just a link to share with you with some resources. So we asked, Amanda, has shared it, same thing. So we asked each presenter to contribute a takeaway. So we have like everything from scholarly articles to some links. I put in a list of all the HumanitiesX projects and one of the heuristics we use to organize the classes. But thanks again for joining us, and have a great rest of the afternoon. And I hope that I'll encounter some of you again in the future.